Some folks say $1 is only $1, but on the frontier, $1 could buy a sack of flour, a night's shelter, or a man's conscience if he had let it grow thin enough. Shame had a way of gathering a crowd faster than a church bell, especially when the weather was cruel and the people were hungry for someone else's trouble. But I have seen one quiet act weigh more than a whole town's judgment, and I have seen a home begin with a coin that was never meant to purchase anything at all. By noon, the rain had turned the main street of Bracken Creek into a brown ribbon of mud, and Alma Jarrett was dragging one foot loose from it as she held a little girl upright beside the courthouse steps. The child's crutch slipped on the wet boards. Alma caught her under both arms before she fell. "Easy, Ruthie," Alma whispered. Though her own hands were shaking, Ruthie's left leg hung narrow and twisted beneath a patched gray dress. Her small boot had been built up with scraps of leather by someone who loved her and did not have the money to do better. She clutched a blue tin button in her fist, polished dull from being rubbed during fear. Alma had sewn that button on a coat once, long before the coat was sold for flour. Now the auctioneer stood under the courthouse awning with his ledger tucked beneath his elbow, calling her name as if she were a milk cow. "Alma Jarrett, widow of no recorded estate," Silas Vane cried, his black hat shining with rain. "And the minor child, Ruth Jarrett, lame but trainable. $1 starts the parish obligation. $1 takes both, with work expected in return." The crowd shifted, boots sucking in the mud. Alma lifted her chin. "She's not lame stock," she said. Vane did not look at her. "Do I hear $1? Before we go farther, tell me where you are watching from. Leave your country in the comments, and if this story touches something gentle in you, like, share, and subscribe so more hearts can find their way home." A laugh came from near the hitching rail, thin and cruel. "Can the widow cook?" someone called. "She can scrub," said another. "Child can scare crows sitting down." Alma's face went white in the rain, but she did not bow her head. Her bonnet brim had collapsed, sending drops down her cheek like tears she refused to spend. One arm stayed around Ruthie's narrow shoulders. The other hand held a cloth bundle tied with twine, 2 dresses, a cracked comb, a Bible with no back cover, and a brass thimble that had belonged to Alma's mother. No one bid. The town had already decided the matter before the auction began. Bracken Creek had no poorhouse. The county kept widows and orphaned children by binding them to whoever would feed them cheapest. Folks called it an obligation sale when they wanted to sleep easier. Alma knew what it was. She had seen men bid on old miners, sick boys, washerwomen with coughs, and one half-blind veteran who had worked himself into a grave before winter ended. Silas Vane cleared his throat. $1, he repeated. "Board, roof, and useful labor. The town will note the purchaser as charitable." Ruthie pressed closer to Alma. "I can work," the child whispered. "Tell them I can peel potatoes." Alma bent her head, only enough for Ruthie to hear. "You do not have to prove your breath is worth keeping." The rain thickened. A wagon rolled past without stopping. A horse stamped under a dripping saddle. Somewhere behind the crowd, a church bell struck once in the wind, and then went silent, as if ashamed to continue. Then a man stepped from beneath the eave of Wilkes Mercantile. He was tall, but not in a way that asked to be noticed. His coat was dark with rain at the shoulders. A scar pulled slightly at the corner of his jaw, pale against weathered skin. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, and his beard was trimmed rough, as if he had done it by lamplight with a dull blade. He did not speak as he came through the mud. People moved aside because of the horse following him. The big dun gelding nosed the man's shoulder, reins hanging loose, as calm as a dog. Silas Vane frowned. Owen Rollins, the silent cowboy, climbed the courthouse steps. He reached into his coat, drew out a silver dollar, and set it on the wet ledger. The coin struck flat and hard. The sound stopped the auction cold. Vane smiled with relief. "Sold, then," Alma Jarrett and child to Owen Rollins of North Fork. Owen's hand came down on the ledger before Vane could mark it. He shook his head once. The crowd held its breath. Vane's smile thinned. You bid, Rollins. That is the law. Owen took the pencil from Vane's fingers, turned the ledger toward himself, and wrote in a slow, blocky hand, for the debt only, not for the woman, not for the child. He pushed the ledger back. Vane read it, color rising in his cheeks. That is not how this proceeding. Owen reached into his coat again and placed 2 more coins beside the first, then another, then a folded banknote, damp at the edges. Vane blinked. Owen wrote another line. County charge paid. Release them. The crowd rustled like dry grass. Though everything was wet, a woman near the back whispered, He paid the whole poor debt? Rollins, don't talk, muttered a freighter. Ain't said a word in years. Alma stared at Owen's hand. It was broad, knuckled and scarred across the tomb. Not a gentleman's hand, not soft. The nails were clean but broken short. Rain slid off his sleeve onto the ledger, blurring the edge of his writing. She should have felt rescued. Instead, shame burned so hot in her chest, she nearly stepped backward. I will not be owned, she said, her voice low. Owen looked at her then. His eyes were gray, not cold, but tired in a way she understood without wanting to. He took the pencil again. No, just one word. He tore the page from the ledger before Vane could stop him and folded it carefully. Then he handed it to Alma, along with the receipt Vane was forced to scratch out beneath half the town's watching eyes. Alma took the paper because refusing it would give Vane power again. Ruthie, still clutching the blue button, stared at the silent man's horse. Is he deaf? She whispered. Alma touched her shoulder. Hush, Owen heard. He gave no sign of offense. He only took off his coat and held it out, not to Alma, but low enough for Ruthie to decide. The child hesitated. Rain soaked through her dress. Her lips were purple. Alma wanted to say no. Pride rose in her like a match, but Ruthie trembled under her palm, small bones knocking with cold. So Alma nodded. Ruthie let Owen drape the coat around her. It nearly swallowed her whole. Silas Vane snapped the ledger shut. This is irregular. Owen looked at him. He said nothing. Sometimes silence could be emptier than fear. Owen Rollins' silence was not empty. It had weight. It settled on the courthouse steps until Vane looked away first. Alma tucked the receipt into her bundle. Where do we go? Owen pointed toward the mercantile, then to the sky, then made a motion of holding reins. Storms worsening. Alma understood. You have a wagon. He nodded. I can pay back what you spent, she said, though she had 4 cents sewn into her hem and no place to sleep. Not today, but I can sew, cook, keep accounts, dress wounds, make soap if there's lye, teach letters if there are children. His eyes flickered at the word children. Then he turned away, leading the dun gelding toward the side alley where a wagon stood under a dripping cottonwood. Ruthie looked up at Alma. Do we follow him? Alma watched the town watch her. Mrs. Peel from the church stood under a black umbrella, lips pressed thin. Mr. Wilkes stared from his store window, though he had refused Alma credit that morning for a half-pound of meal. 2 boys near the trough grinned until Owen's horse swung its head their way. Alma drew Ruthie closer. Yes, she said, but we walk as ourselves. The wagon bed was half filled with sacks of feed, a crate of lamp oil, fence staples, a sack of flour, and a bundle of pine boards wrapped in canvas. Owen lifted the feed sacks aside to make space. He moved carefully around Ruthie, never reaching for her without asking with his eyes. Alma climbed in first, then helped the child up. Ruthie bit her lips so hard it left a white mark. Owen noticed but said nothing. He pulled a folded blanket from under the seat and laid it over her lap. Then he gave Alma the reins to hold, while he tied their bundle beneath the bench to keep it dry. It was a small thing. It told Alma he understood that the bundle mattered. They left Bracken Creek with the courthouse behind them, its windows shining like hard eyes in the rain. The road north ran through low grassland, and then into broken hills where the mud grew black and deep. The wheels groaned. Owen drove with his shoulders hunched against the weather, hat brims streaming water. Alma sat beside Ruthie in the wagon bed, one arm braced around the child. As the wheels dropped into ruts, after a mile, Ruthie fell asleep sitting up, her cheek against Alma's sleeve. Alma looked at the coat wrapped around the little girl and tried not to cry. She had cried enough when Ruthie's father died under a collapsed mind brace. Enough when the company men claimed his debt was larger than his wages. Enough when fever took Alma's own baby 3 years before. So quick and hot, the cradle never had time to forget the wait. Enough when her husband, Thomas Jarrett, left to seek work and never returned. Only his Bible coming back in a mule train with a stranger's apology. Ruthie was Thomas's niece, orphaned last spring. Alma had taken her in because no one else would keep a child who walked slow and needed help with stairs. It had not felt like sacrifice then. It had felt like the only honest thing left. The rain turned to sleet before they reached the ridge. Owen stopped the wagon near a stand of pines. He climbed down and came around to the back. His face was wet, jaw tight with cold. He pointed to Ruthie, then to the trees, then to a darker shape barely visible beyond them. "Shelter?" Alma asked. He nodded. The wagon had bogged to the axle in a low wash where the road dipped. The dun gelding strained, breathing steam, but the wheel only sank deeper. Owen touched the horse's neck, calming it with his palm. Alma looked toward the shadow through the pines. "How far?" Owen held up one finger, then flattened his hand and tilted it. "Not far, but not easy." "I can carry her," Alma said. He looked at her thin arms, then at Ruthie. "I can," Alma insisted. Owen pulled the pencil from his pocket, but the rain had softened it. He tried anyway on a scrap of paper, sheltering it under his hand. "Trail narrow Diaries. I carry supplies. You hold her if you wish. I will walk near." It was the "if you wish" that steadied her. "Alma," woke Ruthie gently. The child whimpered when the cold found her bones again, then tried to stand proud. Her crutch sank at once. Owen took the flour sack, blanket, and Alma's bundle under one arm. With the other, he lifted a lantern from beneath the wagon seat. He did not take Ruthie. He waited. Alma bent and gathered the child against her hip. Ruthie was 9, too old to be carried easily and too young to hide her pain. By the time they reached the pines, Alma's back burned. Sleet stung her face. Her shoes slipped over roots. Twice Owen's free hand came out, not touching unless needed. But there before she fell, the shelter was a lined shack, low and gray, crouched among the trees like something ashamed of being found. Its roof sagged on one side. The door hung crooked, but smoke marks blackened the chimney stones, and inside there was a stove. Owen set down the lantern and forced the door open with his shoulder. Cold dust breathed out. Alma carried Ruthie in and lowered her onto a narrow bunk. The child curled around the blue button. Owen moved in the dark, finding kindling by memory. Within minutes, sparks caught. The stove ticked, then glowed. Firelight reached the room slowly. There was a rough table, 2 stools, a shelf with a tin cup, a coffee pot, 3 mouse-chewed blankets, a coil of rope, and an old pair of child's mittens hanging from a peg. Alma saw Owen notice the mittens. His face closed. He took them down, held them a moment, then placed them in the kindling box beneath a scrap of canvas, as if hiding them from himself. That was the first object from his past Alma ever saw. She said nothing. There are silences a person is invited into, and silence barred shut. Owen's was locked. Alma wrung water from her skirt by the stove. "Do you have coffee?" He pointed to a small tin on the shelf. "Meal?" He nodded toward his feet bundle, then caught himself and opened a flour sack instead. He set it on the table, along with a strip of bacon wrapped in paper and a handful of dried apples. Alma understood then that he had meant to make this trip alone, and had given them the better of what he had without ceremony. She took off her wet bonnet. "I'll cook." He shook his head and pointed to her hands. They were blue with cold. "I have cooked with worse." He took the coffee pot from the shelf and filled it from a bucket near the door. Then he set it on the stove, clumsy but certain, as if feeding people was not his usual work but hunger was a language he respected. Ruthie watched from the bunk. "Mr. Rollins," Owen turned. "Did you buy us?" Alma's heart clenched. Owen went still. The stove popped. He came to the table, found the scrap of paper, and wrote slowly. Then he held it where Ruthie could read. "No person can be bought." Ruthie stared at the words. She moved her lips over them. "Fen, why did you give the $1?" Owen looked at Alma, then back at the child. He turned the paper over to stop them saying it. Ruthie nodded, as if this made more sense than anything else said that day. Alma had to turn away. Outside, the sleet scratched the walls. Inside, bacon hissed in the pan. Alma mixed flour and water with a pinch of salt, patted flat cakes, and set them to brown in grease. Owen split kindling by the open door until Alma told him he was letting in more coal than wood. He stopped at once. That almost made Ruthie smile. They ate at the table with the lantern between them. Owen gave Ruthie the first cake, then took the burned one for himself. Alma noticed. She also noticed that he did not bow his head to pray until Ruthie folded her hands. Then he waited, silent, while Alma spoke thanks in a voice that nearly broke. The night deepened. The line shack roof leaked in 3 places. Alma set cups beneath 2 and a pan beneath the 3rd. Ruthie slept on the bunk, Owen's coat still over her. Owen sat on the floor by the door with his hat on his knee, one hand resting near the stove poker like a man trained by loss to guard even poor shelter. Alma sat awake at the table, mending the torn hem of Ruthie's dress by lantern light. "You could have left us in town," she said at last. Owen's gaze lifted. "You do not owe me kindness." He reached for the pencil. "Took me years to know that." Alma read the words twice. "What?" He looked at the hidden mittens beneath the canvas. Then he took the paper back and folded it away. That was all. By morning, the sleet had become snow. Not soft Christmas snow, but hard, wind-driven snow that filled the wagon ruts and erased the road. Owen went out before dawn. Alma heard the door open, felt the knife of cold, then heard him moving around the sack. By the time Ruthie woke, he had brought in more wood, dug the wagon wheels free, and returned with his eyebrows white and his gloves stiff. Alma had coffee waiting. He stopped when he saw it, not because coffee was rare, though it was, because someone had kept it warm for him. He took the cup with both hands. "Careful," Alma said. "It's strong enough to float nails." One corner of his mouth moved. It was not a smile, not yet, but it changed the room. They could not go on that day. The storm had blocked the ridge road. Owen pointed north when Alma asked about his ranch, then held up 5 fingers, then 3. 8 miles. He nodded. 8 miles might as well have been 80 in that weather with a child who could not walk through drifts. So they stayed. The line shack became a small world. Alma swept mouse droppings from corners with a pine branch. She shook blankets, scrubbed the table with snow, and boiled water before letting Ruthie drink. She patched a tear in Owen's glove without asking. Ruthie sorted dried apples into piles by size and pretended she was keeping store. Owen repaired the door latch with a fence staple and a strip of leather cut from his own saddle tie. By afternoon, the shack smelled of coffee, smoke, wet wool, and brown flour. Ruthie's pain worsened with the cold. She tried to hide it, but Alma saw the tightness around her mouth. Owen saw, too. He reached under the bunk and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were bandage cloth, salve, laudanum, and a child's slate cracked across one corner. Alma touched the slate. Owen shut the box too quickly. "You had a child," she said before she could stop herself. His shoulders hardened. "I'm sorry," she added. "That was not mine to ask." Owen took the slate from the box. His fingers rested over the crack. Then he wrote on it with chalk, "Daughter, Elsie." Ruthie watched him from the bunk. "Did she go to heaven?" Owen looked at the stove. For a long moment, Alma thought he would not answer. Then he nodded. Ruthie accepted that solemnly. My pa too. My they know each other. Owen's hand tightened on the slate. Alma said softly, Ruthie. No, Owen wrote. He held the slate a little longer, then added, my B. That night, when Ruthie's leg cramped so badly she cried into Alma's skirt, Owen went out into the storm and came back with pine boughs. He laid them beneath the thin mattress to soften the bunk. Then he warmed a cloth by the stove and handed it to Alma for Ruthie's knee. He did not try to be tender in a way that would make him seem noble. He simply could not bear a child hurting. The next day broke clear and bitter. The world glittered under ice. The wagon stood freed but rimed white, the dun gelding stamping clouds from his nostrils. Owen loaded the supplies while Alma wrapped Ruthie in every dry thing they had. When Ruthie tried to return Owen's coat, he shook his head. She can't keep it forever, Alma said. He wrote on the wagon board with a bit of charcoal, till warm. The North Fork Ranch lay in a shallow valley between two ridges, half hidden by cottonwoods stripped bare for winter. Alma saw the house first, a long, low cabin with a stone chimney and a porch leaning slightly to the east. Beyond it stood a barn, a smokehouse, a chicken coop, a corral, and miles of fence silvered with frost. It was not poor land. It was neglected land. A gate sagged open. A shutter beat loose against the house. The garden lay black and dead beneath snow, its fence broken where cattle had pushed through. A child's swing hung from an oak limb. One rope snapped, the board resting in the mud beneath it. Ruthie looked at Alma. Alma looked at Owen. He did not look at the swing. Inside, the house was colder than the lined shack, not for lack of wood. Wood was stacked by the hearth. The cold came from vacancy. Dust lay along the mantel. A woman's blue shawl hung on a peg near the bedroom door, untouched so long it had faded where sunlight found it. Tin plates sat clean but unused. One chair at the table had a cracked rung. A small pair of boots waited beneath a bench, stiff with age. Alma understood then that Owen Rollins had not been living in the house so much as enduring it. He set her bundle on the table and stood awkwardly, like a man who had brought strangers into a grave. You live alone, Alma said. He nodded. Do you want us in the barn? His head came up sharply. She met his gaze. I need to know the terms, not for pride, for safety. He took out the pencil. House, spare room, work if you choose. Wages when I can. Alma, read it. Wages. He nodded. What work? He looked around, almost helplessly. Then his eyes fell on the coal stove, the dusty shelves, the broken latch, the life he had left unmade. Alma removed her wet gloves. I will cook, wash, mend, keep the house, help with accounts, tend chickens, and put the garden back if spring comes. Ruthie will do lessons and light chores only when she is able. She is not hired, Owen wrote. Agreed, Alma added. And we are free to leave. His pencil paused. Then, always. The spare room held a rope bed, a trunk with nothing in it, and a small window facing the barn. Alma helped Ruthie sit while she shook out the mattress. Mice had chewed one corner. The quilt smelled of cedar and old sorrow. Ruthie touched the window glass. Can we stay here tonight? Yes, Alma said. Will the town come get us? No, because Mr. Rollins bought. Because Mr. Rollins paid a debt that should never have been laid on a child, Alma said. And because I have the receipt. Ruthie nodded and took the blue button from her pocket. She set it on the windowsill. For luck, she said. That evening, Alma cooked beans, bacon, and biscuits with flour from Owen's sack. She found onions in the cellar and a jar of peaches put up so long ago the syrup had darkened. She hesitated before opening it. Owen saw, he wrote, use what's here? Someone saved these. His face changed. After a moment, he wrote, she did. Alma set the jar back. Owen reached past her, took it down again, and placed it firmly on the table. Use what's here, he had written. So Alma did. They ate peaches that tasted of summer in a house that had not felt summer for years. Ruthie fell asleep before finishing her biscuit. Owen carried the child to the spare room only after Alma nodded permission. He moved as if holding something breakable and holy. When he came back, Alma was washing dishes in a tin basin. "You do not have to pay wages until spring," she said. "Food and shelter count." He shook his head. "You are stubborn." He looked at her. Then he pointed at her. It startled a laugh from her, small and rusty. The laugh startled them both. Days began to arrange themselves. Owen rose before dawn and went to the barn. Alma learned the sound of his boots on the porch, the low murmur he gave the horses though he gave no words to people, the scrape of the bucket at the well, the way he closed doors softly when Ruthie slept. Alma rose after him, built the fire, ground coffee, mixed dough and set beans to soak. Ruthie fed the hens from a stool near the coop, tossing grain with solemn care while the birds fussed around her skirts. The first week, Owen always ate fast and alone if he could. The second week he stayed at the table until Ruthie finished. By the third he began leaving the coffee pot near the back of the stove for Alma when she came in from hanging wash in the freezing yard. Alma noticed every change but named none of them. She had learned not to frighten kindness by staring at it too hard. The ranch changed under her hands. Curtains came down and were beaten clean. The cracked chair rung was wrapped with rawhide. The blue shawl was washed, dried, folded, and placed in a cedar chest after Alma asked with her eyes, and Owen gave one slow nod. The child's boots beneath the bench remained where they were. Alma would not touch what he had not surrendered. She found his account book in a drawer beneath harness buckles and old receipts. The numbers were bad, not hopeless, but bad. Owen had cattle enough, land enough, and skill enough. What he did not have was help, credit, or a willingness to enter town unless forced. A note held by Bracken Creek Bank came due in April. Interest had grown like mold in a damp cellar. Silas Vane's signature appeared on several entries, not as auctioneer, but as clerk for the bank. Alma closed the book when Owen entered. He saw it anyway. "I kept books for the mine boarding house," she said. "Your feed charges are wrong." He walked to the table. She opened the ledger and pointed. "Here, Wilkes charged you for 12 sacks. You brought 8. Same in November. And again in September." Owen studied the page. His mouth tightened. "You knew?" He shook his head. "You did not look." His eyes flashed, not with anger at her, but at himself. Alma softened her voice. "Grief makes thieves bold." He sat down as if the chair had been taken from under him. After a while, he wrote, "My wife read the books. Elsie's mother?" He nodded. "What was her name?" His fingers rested on the pencil. "Mara." Alma spoke it gently. "Mara." The room seemed to hear. Owen's hand trembled once, then steadied. That night, after Ruthie had gone to bed, Owen brought a small wooden horse to the table. One wheel was missing from its cart. He set it before Alma like a confession. "Elsie's." Alma touched the horse's chipped ear. "Did you carve it?" He nodded. "It's good work," he wrote. "Cart broke before fever." Alma waited. The wind pressed at the walls. He wrote another line, slower. "I was in the north pasture when she took bad." Alma did not say it was not his fault. People said that too quickly, as if grief were a barn door to be shut. Instead she asked, "Did she know you loved her?" Owen looked at her, eyes bright with pain. Then he nodded. "That has to count for something," Alma whispered. He folded his hands around the pencil until the wood cracked. She reached across the table and took the broken pieces from him before the splinters cut his palm. For a moment his fingers stayed beneath hers. Then he drew back, not rudely, like a man stepping away from warmth because he feared he would need it. The town did not leave them in peace. Word traveled quicker than thought. Alma Jarrett, who had stood on the auction block, was living at Owen Rollins' ranch. Some said he had bought himself a servant. Some said worse. Mrs. Peel came one bright morning with 2 church women and a basket of stale rolls, asking to see how the poor souls had been situated. Alma met them on the porch with flour on her sleeves and her hair pinned neat. Ruthie sat inside by the stove, reading from the Bible in a clear voice. Mrs. Peel looked past Alma. "We only wish to ensure propriety." Propriety stood in the courthouse rain and said nothing. Alma replied. The woman's face hardened. "You ought to be grateful, Mrs. Jarrett." "I am grateful for kindness," Alma said, "not humiliation." Owen came from the barn then, carrying a broken bridle. He stopped at the yard gate when he saw the women. Mrs. Peel brightened falsely. "Mr. Rollins, perhaps you will tell us what arrangement." Owen dropped the bridle, took the small slate from the porch rail where Ruthie used it for lessons, and wrote so large they could read it from the steps. "Alma Jarrett is housekeeper here by agreement. Ruth is a child under my protection. Speak with respect or leave." Mrs. Peel drew herself up. "There is no need for rudeness." Owen underlined leave. The women left. Alma stood on the porch, heart pounding. When Owen came up the steps, she said, "You made it worse for yourself." He shrugged. "I am serious." He picked up the slate and wiped it clean with his sleeve. Then he wrote again, smaller this time. "They were making it worse for you." Alma had no answer for that. The thaw came mean. Snow melted into brown torrents that cut the road and flooded the low pasture. The creek rose behind the barn, chewing at its banks. Weather was not scenery in that country. It decided whether fences held, whether calves lived, whether wagons crossed, whether a child's weak leg ached all night. Rain drummed the roof for 3 days and found every seam Alma had not yet patched. On the 4th day, Ruthie developed a cough. Alma sat up with her through the night, rubbing her chest with camphor and listening to each breath scrape in and out. Owen kept the fire high without being asked. At dawn, he hitched the wagon. "The creek's up," Alma said. He nodded. "You cannot cross it." He pointed toward town, then to Ruthie. "Dr. Bell won't come this far in rain," Alma said. "He refused the minor camps half the time." Owen's face darkened. He took his rifle from above the door, wrapped it in oilcloth, and set it behind the wagon seat. "Owen." He paused at his name in her mouth. It was the first time she had used it without Mr. "The water will take the wagon." He wrote on a scrap and handed it to her. "Then I ride." She grabbed his sleeve. "That is not bravery. That is foolishness." He looked down at her hand. She let go. Ruthie coughed from the bed. A small, tearing sound. Owen took Alma's shawl from the peg and placed it around her shoulders. Then he tapped his chest once, pointed to the road, and left before she could argue him into staying alive. All day, the rain fell. Alma made onion poultices, boiled willow bark, changed cloths, prayed without pretty words, and watched the road through the gray window. Ruthie drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes calling for her papa, sometimes for Alma, once for Mr. Rollins' horse. Near dusk, Alma saw a shape through the rain. Owen came on foot, leading the dun gelding. Dr. Bell rode behind him on a mule, hunched and furious, beneath a slicker. Owen's hat was gone. Blood ran from a cut at his temple. One sleeve hung torn. Mud covered him to the waist. Dr. Bell came in muttering about washed bridges and stubborn fools. "Child first," Alma said. The doctor gave her a sharp look, then set down his bag. Ruthie had lung fever starting, but not settled deep yet. "Medicine, heat, rest, and luck," he said. He left powders and instructions. Owen paid him with cash from a coffee tin hidden beneath the floorboard, though Alma saw how few coins remained after. When the doctor had gone to sleep in the chair because the creek could not be crossed back, Alma found Owen in the barn, stripping the wet saddle from the dun. "You could have drowned." He kept working. "You crossed floodwater for a child you met weeks ago." His hands slowed. "She is not Elsie," Alma said softly. He turned then, and the pain in his face made her wish she had not spoken. But truth, once loose, had to be handled. "I know you know that," she said. "I only mean you do not have to pay death back with your own life." Owen gripped the saddle horn. For the first time, a sound came from him. not a word. A broken breath, rough and low. Alma stepped closer, but did not touch him. After a long moment, he reached into his shirt and drew out a small leather cord. On it hung a brass locket, dented on one side. He opened it with difficulty. Inside was a tiny curl of fair hair and a faded scrap of blue ribbon. He held it out. Alma looked, then looked away to give his grief privacy. He pressed the locket into her palm. Then he wrote with a piece of chalk on the barn post, "Could not save mine." Alma closed her fingers around the locket. "No," he shut his eyes. "You could not save her," Alma said. "That is different." Rain hammered the barn roof. The horses shifted, warm and living in the dark. Owen's shoulders bent, as if under a weight he had been carrying so long. He had mistaken it for his own bones. Alma placed the locket back in his hand. "Ruthie needs you living," she said. "So do I." He opened his eyes. She had not meant to say the last part. "Or my baby," she had. Neither of them moved. Then Ruthie coughed from the house, and the moment folded itself away. The child recovered slowly. For 2 weeks, the house revolved around Breath. Alma slept in a chair by Ruthie's bed. Owen took over chores she could not reach. He burned biscuits, oversalted beans, and once fed the hens oats meant for the horses. But he did every task without complaint. When Alma finally slept at the table with her head on her folded arms, she woke to find Owen's coat draped over her shoulders and coffee warm near her elbow. Ruthie began eating again on a Tuesday, only half a biscuit, soaked in broth, but Alma cried over it, as if it were a feast. Owen walked outside and stood on the porch with his face turned toward the ridge. When he came back in, he had carved a new handle for Ruthie's crutch from smooth cottonwood, shaped to fit her hand. He had wrapped the grip in soft leather. Ruthie held it like treasure. "Now I can go faster," she said. Alma smiled. "Not too fast." Ruthie looked at Owen. "Can I see the chickens?" He nodded. "Can you come too?" He hesitated. Then he held out his hand. Ruthie took it. Alma watched from the doorway as the silent cowboy walked beside the child he had not bought, matching every uneven step as if the whole world had slowed to her pace. Spring came in pieces, first mud, then meadowlarks, then green along the creek. Alma turned the dead garden with a hoe she found behind the smokehouse. Owen repaired the fence around it without being asked. Ruthie planted beans crookedly and named each row after people she liked. One row was Alma, one was Owen, one was the dun horse, whose name turned out to be Joseph. When Owen finally wrote it down, the house opened its eyes. Clean curtains moved in warmer wind. Bread rose beneath a towel. A jar of wildflowers appeared on the table because Ruthie picked them, and Owen found a bottle to hold them. Alma made soap in a black kettle and burned her wrist with lye. Owen bandaged it with such stern concentration that Ruthie giggled. "He looks angry at your hand," she said. "He is angry at the burn," Alma replied. Owen gave Ruthie a look. The child giggled harder. Alma began going through the account books each evening. Owen sat opposite her, mending harness or carving small things from scrap wood. They spoke in pencil and short phrases. She learned that he had lost his voice 3 years earlier, not to injury, but after the fever took Mara and Elsie within 4 days of each other. The doctor said there was no damage. The preacher said sorrow had shut a door inside him. Owen did not write that he believed either man. He simply wrote words left. Alma did not press. One night, she told him about Thomas Jarrett, not the soft version, the true one. He was kind when sober, she said, turning her thimble between her fingers, but hope made him reckless. He chased silver strikes like a man chasing lanterns in fog. When there was money, he gave too much away. When there was none, he borrowed from men who smiled while writing ruin. He did not mean to leave me with debt, but harm done without meaning is still harm someone must carry. Owen listened. The lamp hissed softly. My baby was named Samuel, Alma said. He lived 7 months. Owen's hand went still. I had a cradle, she continued. Thomas made it from pine. One side never sat straight, so it rocked with a little hitch. After Samuel died, I sold the cradle to buy coal. I hated the woman who bought it because she was happy to have it. Then I hated myself for hating her. Owen reached across the table and touched the brass thimble. One tap, a question. My mother's, Alma said. She sewed for officers' wives at Fort Leon. She used to say a woman with a needle could hold the world together one seam at a time. I thought that foolish when I was young. She gave a tired smile. Now I think it was prayer. Owen took the slate and wrote. You held Ruth. Alma's eyes filled. That seam nearly tore. He wrote, didn't. That was all. It was enough. The midpoint came with a letter. It arrived folded inside a bank notice, carried by a rider from town who would not step past the gate. Alma knew the handwriting before she opened it. Ezra Pike, her late husband's cousin, a man who had refused to take Ruthie unless the county paid him monthly for the trouble. Mrs. Jarrett, word has reached me that you were installed at Rawlins Place under questionable circumstance. As Ruth is blood kin to my side, I mean to claim her for respectability. There is talk of county impropriety in the auction. If you do not surrender the child peaceably, I will petition the court and state you are unfit, having lived under a bachelor's roof. Any small debt regarding Thomas may also be brought forth. E. Pike. Alma read the letter twice. Then she went cold from the inside out. Ruthie was in the yard with Owen, learning to scatter seed without losing balance. Owen had tied a rope between two posts for her to hold as she walked the garden row. The child's laughter came through the window, bright and thin as a new green shoot. Alma packed before supper. Not much. The same bundle, 2 dresses, Bible, comb, thimble, Ruthie's extra stockings, the receipt from the courthouse. She moved quietly, each folded cloth a wound. Owen found her in the spare room. He stood in the doorway, eyes on the bundle. I have to go, Alma said. He did not move. Ezra Pike will take Ruthie if I stay. He will use this house against us, against you. The town will believe whatever sounds dirtiest. Owen's jaw tightened. He is blood kin, Alma said. I am only aunt by marriage. If he brings Thomas's debt before a judge, if Vane helps him, if they say I let myself be kept here. Owen stepped into the room. Alma shook her head. Do not make this harder. He took the bundle from her hands and set it back on the bed. She snatched it up again. I said, I have to go. Owen took the slate from the shelf, but his hand shook so badly the chalk broke. He threw the chalk aside, seized the pencil, and wrote on the back of Ezra's letter, Stay. One word. Alma's breath caught. That is not enough. He stared at the paper, then at her. She hated the hurt in his eyes, because it weakened the wall she needed. You cannot fix every shame with money, she said. You cannot stand silent in front of every crowd and stop them. Ruthie needs a lawful home no one can question, he wrote. This is home. Alma closed her eyes. The sentence struck too deep. When she opened them, he was still there, standing between her and the old life that kept reaching for her throat. What are you asking me? She whispered. Owen looked toward the yard, where Ruthie's laughter had quieted. Then he looked back at Alma with a terror more naked than any grief he had shown. He wrote slowly, Marry me, not for owning, for shielding, for staying, only if you choose. Alma stared at the words. A marriage of protection was not new on the frontier. Women had married for land, safety, children, passage, food, names that could not be taken from them. Alma knew that. She also knew the danger of entering a vow as if it were a locked door. Owen, she said carefully, I will not be bought by a kinder man than the ones on those steps. Pain moved across his face. He knelt, not as a suitor performing romance, but so she would not have to look up at him. Then he wrote on the floorboard with the pencil, because there was no paper left in his hand. No buying, asking. Alma's throat closed. Outside, Ruthie called. Aunt Alma. The world waited. Alma folded Ezra's letter. I cannot answer from fear, she said. If I marry you, it will not be because Ezra Pike frightened me into your name. Owen nodded once. I need until morning. He stood and stepped aside, not blocking the door, not opening it, letting her choose. That night, Alma did not sleep. She sat by the cold window and watched moonlight silver the barn roof. She thought of the courthouse steps, the ledger, the dollar. She thought of Owen crossing floodwater for a doctor. Owen underlining leave. Owen writing this is home, like a man laying his heart on a table without asking praise for it. Near dawn she found him in the barn, sitting on an overturned bucket beside Joseph. I have conditions, she said. Owen rose too fast and struck his shoulder on a beam. She almost smiled. Ruthie remains mine to care for, and yours only by love, not command. He nodded. I keep wages and accounts. If you ever wish me gone, you say so plainly in writing. If I ever wish to leave, I leave with what is mine. He nodded again. And I will not have a wedding where people whisper that you took pity on courthouse trash. His eyes hardened at the phrase. They will, she said. He reached for the slate hanging by the stall and wrote, Then I answer. How? You cannot speak? Owen looked at the chalk in his hand. Then he pressed 2 fingers to his throat, and for the first time since she had known him, he tried. A sound came out broken, raw, barely shaped. No, it was almost not a word, but it was. Joseph startled. Alma covered her mouth. Owen looked more shocked than either of them. He swallowed, pain crossing his face. Then he tried again, quieter. No, the word trembled in the barn air, small as a newborn thing. Alma stepped toward him. This time, when her hand found his, he did not pull away. They married 3 days later in the church with rain tapping the windows, and half the town present, because scandal drew better than hymns. Alma wore her clean brown dress, with a collar she had mended by candlelight. Ruthie wore a blue ribbon, Alma made from the lining of the old bonnet. Owen wore a black coat brushed hard enough to shine at the elbows. He stood straight beside Alma, pale but steady. Reverend Cole, who had said nothing at the auction, looked ashamed as he opened the book. When he asked who gave Alma Jared, Alma answered, I give myself. A murmur passed through the pews. Owen's hand found hers. The Reverend continued. When the vows came, Alma spoke clearly. Owen had written his on paper, but when the moment arrived he folded the paper and put it away. His throat worked. The church became so still the rain seemed loud. I do, he said. 2 words, rough, painful, certain. Ruthie began to cry silently in the front pew. Mrs. Peel looked at her gloves. Silas Vane stood in the back with Ezra Pike beside him, both men wearing expressions that said this was not finished. They were right. April brought grass, calves, and the banknote. It also brought Ezra Pike to the ranch with Sheriff Calder, Silas Vane, and a court paper folded inside his coat. Alma saw them from the garden and worked her hands on her apron before calling Ruthie into the house. Owen came from the barn, carrying a hammer. He set it down by the gate before walking to meet them. Ezra Pike was narrow-faced, with a reddish beard and city boots, too clean for the yard. He tipped his hat to Alma as if courtesy could cover rot. Mrs. Rollins now, I hear, he said. Convenient. Alma stood on the porch. State your business. I have come for my cousin's child. Ruthie's breath caught behind the screen door. Owen heard it. Sheriff Calder looked uncomfortable. There's a petition, Alma. Claims the child's nearest blood relation wants custody. Claims concerns about her welfare before the marriage. Her welfare was auctioned in the rain, Alma said. Where was Mr. Pike then? Ezra smiled slightly. I was not informed. You were written to twice. Letters go astray. Owen stepped forward. Silas Vane opened his leather folder. There is also the matter of Thomas Jarrett's outstanding debt. Certain obligations might affect the widow's credibility. Alma felt the old trap closing. Debt, shame. respectability. Words men used like rope. Owen looked at Vane, then at Ezra, then at the sheriff. I can show receipts, Alma said. I have the county release. Vane's eyes gleamed. A release from county charge, yes, not from private debt, and not from questions regarding the nature of your arrangement here prior to marriage. Owen made a sound low in his throat. Alma touched his arm. No, Ezra looked past them toward the house. Ruth, come out. I have a proper place for you. Ruthie opened the door before Alma could stop her. She stood with her new crutch, face white but chin lifted. I'm not going. Ezra's mouth tightened. Children do not decide. No, Ruthie said. But I remember, you said my leg would cost more than I was worth. The sheriff looked at Ezra. Ezra flushed. A grieving child mishears. Owen walked to the porch and lifted Ruthie in his arms, not to hide her, to bring her forward. He set her gently beside Alma, then stood one step below them, between his family and the yard. His face had gone gray. Speaking hurt him. Alma knew it. Each word was pulled across scarred country inside him. But he took off his hat, looked Sheriff Calder in the eye, and forced his voice into the open. She stays. The words were rough, but the yard heard them. Vane recovered first. That is not your decision alone, Rollins. And unless your note is paid by Friday, Norfolk might not be your home much longer. Alma turned sharply. Owen did not. Vane smiled. Yes, the banknote, due with interest. If unpaid, the property can be called. A man without land has little standing in a custody matter. There it was. The true auction had never ended. They had only moved it from courthouse steps to a ranch yard. Owen's eyes went to the barn, the fences, the house, the garden, Ruthie's rope between posts, Alma's curtains in the window, everything that had begun to live again. How much? Alma asked. Vane named the sum. It was more than the cash box, more than cattle could bring quickly without selling too low, more than pride could answer. But Alma had read the books. She stepped down from the porch. Your feed charges were false. Vane's smile faded. I have dates, amounts, and witnesses to deliveries, Alma said. You charged for goods not received. You added interest after payments. You counted the same lien twice. That is a serious accusation from a woman who can act, Alma said. Sheriff Calder coughed. Owen looked at her, and there was something like wonder in his tired eyes. Vane snapped, Bring whatever scribbles you like. The bank holds the note, and I hold letters, Alma said. Vane stilled. Alma reached into her apron pocket and drew out 3 envelopes tied with thread. Mrs. Wilkes gave them to me yesterday. Her husband kept copies because he feared being blamed if your figures were questioned. You instructed him to short deliveries to North Fork and split the charge. Mr. Wilkes had not done it from courage. He had done it because his wife had a brother on a neighboring ranch and knew how quickly dishonest books could ruin a family. Still, truth was truth. Even when delivered late, Sheriff Calder took the letters. Vane lunged, but Owen moved first. He did not strike him. He simply caught Vane's wrist and held it until the man stopped trying. The sheriff read enough to change his face. Ezra Pike stepped back. This is bank business. It has nothing to do with the child. It speaks to conspiracy, Alma said, and coercion. Owen released Vane. Then he did something Alma did not expect. He walked to the barn and returned with a small iron box. From it, he took the deed to the far north pasture, 40 acres of good grazing land along the creek, land he had refused to sell even under pressure because Mara had loved the cottonwoods there. He handed the deed to Sheriff Calder, then looked at Alma. She understood with a jolt. No, she whispered. Owen nodded. He would sell Mara's pasture to clear the note if the law delayed. If the bank twisted, if truth took too long, he would sacrifice the last untouched piece of his old life to protect the new one. Alma stepped down beside him. You do not do this alone." His eyes searched hers. She took off her mother's brass thimble. It was worth almost nothing, a few cents at most, but it was the only thing she had carried through every loss. She placed it in his palm, beside the deed. "Whatever saves this home," she said. We both lay something down. Owen closed his hand around the thimble, and for a moment, grief and love stood together in the yard without fighting. The sheriff folded the letters. "Vane, you're coming with me." Silas Vane protested loudly, then less loudly when Sheriff Calder took his arm. Ezra Pike tried one more time. "The child is blood." Ruthie moved forward with her crutch. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "Blood left me," she said. "They stayed." No one spoke. Ezra looked at Alma, then Owen, then the sheriff, and saw no easy profit remaining. He mounted his horse with a curse and rode out through the gate Owen had repaired. The custody petition died before it reached a judge. Vane's fraud did not vanish so quickly, but it broke his power. The banknote was recalculated under Sheriff Calder's eye, with Mrs. Wilkes' letters and Alma's books spread across the mercantile counter. Owen sold 6 steers at a fair price, not the pasture. Alma kept the accounts in ink so clear no man could pretend confusion. And Bracken Creek, which had watched a woman and child priced at $1, found itself forced to watch them stand upright. Public apologies came poorly. Reverend Cole gave his after-Sunday service, hat in both hands, voice low. "Mrs. Rollins, Ruth, I failed you on those steps." Alma looked at Ruthie. Ruthie looked at Owen. Owen looked at Alma. Alma said, "Do better for the next poor soul." The Reverend bowed his head. "I will." Mrs. Peel brought fresh rolls this time, not stale ones. Alma accepted them because refusing bread helped no one. But she did not pretend bread erased memory. Mr. Wilkes cleared Owen's account and gave Ruthie a peppermint stick. Ruthie took it after checking Alma's face, then gave half to Owen. He put it in his shirt pocket as seriously as if she had handed him a medal. Summer came warm and full. The garden rose green around the house. Beans climbed poles. Marigolds flamed along the fence to keep pests away. Alma planted sweet peas beneath the porch, and their thin tendrils caught the rails like little hands. Ruthie grew stronger by inches. She still hurt when storms came, still dragged the left foot when tired, still woke sometimes afraid of courthouse steps. But she also learned to gather eggs, read 4 chapters, and ride Joseph while Owen led him slow around the yard. Owen's voice returned in fragments. Never much. A yes, a no. Alma's name once, spoken in the dark when a nightmare had her sitting upright with her hand at her throat. He had lit the lamp and said, "Alma," and the sound of it brought her back from every auction block memory. He still wrote often. She loved his written words too. One evening in late August, rain came again. Not cruel this time, but steady and silver, softening the dust and tapping the new roof shingles Owen had laid over the porch. Alma stood at the stove frying potatoes while beans simmered and coffee kept warm at the back. Ruthie slept in the front room on a quilt, worn out from helping pick peas. Her crutch leaned beside her, its cottonwood handle smooth from use. Owen came in carrying a repaired wooden horse, Elsie's horse. The cart had a new wheel. Alma wiped her hands on her apron. "You fixed it," he nodded. "Are you sure?" He looked toward Ruthie, asleep with her mouth slightly open and one hand curled around the blue button she still kept. Then he set the horse on the shelf above the stove, not hidden, not buried, not given away. Kept, Alma understood. Some grief was not meant to be healed by forgetting. Some grief needed a place at the table where it could sit quietly while life went on around it. Owen took the brass thimble from his pocket. He had carried it since the day in the yard. Now he placed it beside Alma's sewing basket. "I wondered where that had gone," she said softly. His voice came rough but clear enough. "Safe?" Alma looked at him. Outside, rainwater ran from the porch roof into barrels. The repaired gate held against the wind. Curtains moved in the open window. The house smelled of potatoes, coffee, wood smoke, and the lavender Alma had tucked into drawers. Ruthie sighed in her sleep. Owen stepped close, slowly enough that she could move away. She did not. He touched the back of her hand with 2 fingers. A question. Alma turned her hand and held his. No crowd watched. No ledger waited. No coins struck a page. There was only a warm stove, a sleeping child, rain making peace with the roof, and 2 people who had learned that dignity could be defended in public. But love was built in private, one quiet mercy at a time. Later, when supper was done, they sat on the porch while the storm passed east over the hills. Ruthie slept inside under a clean quilt. The repaired fence shone dark in the rain. The sweet peas trembled along the rail, and coffee waited in 2 tin cups between Alma and Owen. $1 had once been laid down to stop a town from naming a woman and child as property, but what came after was not purchase. It was bread shared, books balanced, fever watched, mud crossed, shame answered, and a home made visible by hands that stayed. And if you had passed North Fork in those years and seen lamplight in the window, a child's crutched by the door, and a silent cowboy smiling at a woman who had never belonged to anyone but herself, you would have known the truth without being told. Some auctions end with a gavel. That one ended with a family